Let's talk about oil pressure. The H2 and the ZH2 and the H2SX all share the same oil pump. These bikes are renowned for having low oil pressure. It's scary how low Kawasaki runs the oil pressure in these engines. Their spec is for 28 to 35 psi at 4,000 revs at 50 degrees Celsius oil temperature. But that's not the running temperature of the bike. You get these up to around 80, 90 degrees C, and that oil pressure drops down, and at idle it can get down below 5 psi, which is too low in my opinion. We've spent a couple of years developing an oil pump upgrade. We've been testing it for over a year. Some drag racing friends of ours have been running these pumps in their bikes. It's almost as if Kawasaki designed the engine to accept the larger oil pump. We were able to make a new G-rotor unit that fits in the stock location, just with a new water pump in a housing. So yeah, it increases the oil pressure about between 30 to 50%. For example, at idle, it's about with our pump it runs about 30% higher than the factory, and then that goes up to around 50% higher in the mid-range, and then once the pressure relief valve starts to open, it drops back to about 30% again. So it's not a linear increase across the board. It just has to work in conjunction with the other parts of the engine. What I want to do, we've got the fuel tech on this bike, and we've got a oil pressure sensor tapped into the main oil galley on the motor, and I'll show you that in a second. And so we're monitoring oil pressure on the main galley, which feeds the big ends and the mains of the crankshaft. We've seen stories of customers riding away from the dealerships on brand new bikes and having their oil pressure light come on. This is how low the oil pressure can be in these engines. Why is it so low? Because in these motors there's extra shafts. There's two balance shafts, and then there's the extra shafts to drive the supercharger and the actual supercharger itself, and all those things have little passages and oil squirters and whatnot to bleed off, and that bleeds off some of the oil pressure. I don't know why they run such a small oil pump. It is very small. You look at a ZX14, ZX10 pumps, and relatively for the amount of what's going on inside this engine, it's quite a small pump. It might be because of emissions, or it might be just to try and get efficiency or whatnot. But when you start adding 30-40% power to one of these engines, and you don't upgrade the oil system, then you're asking for trouble. There's endless amounts of stories of people doing big end bearings, and I guarantee you most of it is because of a lack of oil pressure, tuning or oil pressure. So I'll just give you a quick run through on how what we do with these, how we fit this pump to the bike. Give you a look at it, and yeah, we'll show you what kind of increased safe oil pressure you get. Alright, so this is our setup on the side of the motor. This is the main oil galley on the engine down here that we have tapped into. The factory oil pressure switch is also tapped into that on the front of the motor, but there's a plug on the end of it, so we've just tapped into that. We're running a hose up and to our sensor, which is located up here, and that is wired into the FuelTech ECU. Just to give you a bit of a look on how the system is all connected. So the first thing we've got to do is drain the coolant from the away from the water pump here. So I'll remove all this. Don't worry about this. I'm just changing the gearing, but I've got to do that when I take all this off. So then, yeah, we'll drain the coolant and then we can access the oil pump, which is inside behind here. The other thing I forgot to mention was that you've got to drain the engine oil, which I've done, and then you just got to pop the oil pump, water pump assembly out. I've loosened all the bolts now. Just got to get this hose off as I pull it out. The oil comes out because of the oil pump there. Whole assembly, and then the rest of the G rotor comes out like that. And I'll show you how to assemble the new oil pump and the new backing plate up on the bench. Alright, so here we are with our oil pump kit, and these are the parts that the new parts that come with the kit. So you've got the center housing, which replaces this silver bit there. We've got our pump G rotor, which is you can see that it's 5mm wider than the OEM rotor. We've got a new dowel pin to fit that inner rotor, a bit of silicone grease for assembly, and that's the inner part of the seal that is on the back of the water pump. You may or may not need that. Well, if your pump's old, you may want to replace it, but this pump is basically brand new, so I won't be replacing that. So when you take that front cover off, just make sure the two dowel pins come away with the cover, or you've got to remove them from that inner piece. They just sort of fit in there loosely, so don't lose them. Then you've got to take that center, that 10mm center bolt off, out, and then you can just remove the water pump rotor. So that's where that seal goes. If yours is damaged, you can replace that. You can just lever it out with a screwdriver and replace it. This one's in good condition. And then this the whole pump assembly comes apart like that. The whole shaft comes out. There's the dowel pin in there, and the inner part of the rotor comes away. You can see here the difference of the inner section. The new one is just the new housing is just 5mm shorter than the OEM housing, and that is just to allow for the 5mm wider pump rotor that sits inside it. So the reassembly is just the opposite. We assemble our new inner rotor onto the shaft using our new dowel pin, and make sure that the slot is facing out once it's assembled. Lubricate that with a bit of fresh engine oil. There's a bit of oil on that in that package. So, and it just carefully inserts back in. Now there's a seal inside here, an oil seal. You want to be careful not to damage that. You just got to just ease it in so that it goes in smoothly and comes through like that. Then you can reassemble the water pump on the front side of that. And then that just needs to be torqued to 10 Newton meters, like so. And now we can put our front cover back on, making sure your dowel pins are in the right position. It just all fits together like that. And then we can put that back on the bike. Some fresh engine oil on that and reinsert it on the bike. We supply some silicone grease for the O-ring that you can put on the O-ring. You can also use it to lubricate the shaft if you haven't got engine oil handy. So now we're ready to go and put the whole new pump assembly back in the engine. Alright, we're back over at the bike, and I've got the this area cleaned up. I've now put the other front sprocket on that I was going to change over to, going to a 19 tooth front. I'm actually going to remove the front cover again because it's easier to get the oil pump, the slot in the oil pump lined up without any, like I can turn the rotor on the front to get it to line up. So a bit of clean engine oil, just lubricate the gear and the rotor. This is not directional, you can just go in either way. Perfect fit. So it just slots in, and then if you turn the rotor, you'll find the position where it fits onto the shaft inside the motor, just like that. It's a bit fiddly to get in, to get it lined up, but once you get it in the right spot, it just fits in nicely. I'm going to refit our front cover. And now we can refit all our other ancillary parts, the water, plumbing. Alright, so we've got it all back together and everything's on. So we'll put some fresh engine oil in and then give it a start and see what we got. So now when we've warmed it up, and we're sitting at about 7 or 8, but as soon as you rev it up to the 4,000, about 38 psi as opposed to about 25 previously.